not want to be intimidated by a blank piece of paper? Maybe you teach people and they're like, oh, I can't think of what to draw. I can't think of what to do. And of course, I say think with your pencil, but today I'm going to say think with your brush. And we're focusing here on many other mediums besides watercolor, but I'm going to just start here. I just took a little green and a little red and made them into a very beautiful gray. And I don't know that that's what I'm going to end up showing you here. Here's a blue and an orange. And so the blue and the orange are also going to go into a very beautiful gray. And then let's see here, could we use the yellow and the purple? The purple's going to overshadow the yellow a lot of times. And now it's going into a very nice brown. Let's get a little more yellow in here. And we've got that. And I'm just using a very big brush here to, here's another orange. And let's take orange and purple now. And some more yellow to that. And just combining a couple of different colors and either desaturating them all the way to this gray that I had. The blue and the orange are big stars of making a gray. And then also the green and the red are also big stars of making some kind of gray. In this case, a purple. So I'm going to just go ahead and put a little bit of purple in here too. And I'm just laying this brush down and I'm experimenting in a way that is very, very watercolor friendly, in that I'm getting in and then I'm getting out. So the only thing that's particularly saturated here is this orange, and it's not very saturated, but you see in relationship to everything else it is. Now I'm going to put the watercolors away and I'm going to put the brush down here, and if I wanted to I could manipulate this and let some of it run or do some things like that, but I think I'm just going to let this, take it outside and let it get into the sun. And I'm going to bring in a much more saturated one that I did before. But again, so here's a new one, here's the old one, and it's just the idea that with just a few strokes, I make the whole paper something that's not intimidating, something that's already happened on it, take away the white surface, and give something to play with here. So whether it's this, it's going to go outside and get dry, or it's this that I painted before and is already dry, I now have a place to play with my graphite, my charcoal, which is a soft charcoal. It's soft, extra soft vine charcoal. This is a soft pencil, a 9B pencil. Then I have Prismacolors, meaning soft colored pencils. And then last, but certainly not least, and the biggest thing on the block here in terms of being opaque and thick is Craypaw's Junior Artists Oil Pastels. In addition to that, I'm going to later bring in bristle brushes that are oil painting brushes, along with some mineral spirits, which are the gamsol, the least toxic of mineral spirits that are also, they're like turpentine, but they don't smell. They are odorless. And this is what schools suggest for working with students. So I'll put the brushes to the side right now, and we're going to focus on saturation and desaturation. So one of the first things I'm going to do is desaturate some of this color. I probably don't have to because it's dry and it's down below, and so just like my colored pencils, it's going to give me a surface that will exist below my graphite, which is what I'm going to start with. I'm going to first connect with the graphite, and I'm going to collaborate, have no idea how, with this pre-underpainting that is done in watercolor. I'm going to do my connection and my scribbling first, and I'm not making everything happen right now with just the graphite, as I did in 2 other versions of this, where I didn't start with the color ahead of time. I started with the blank paper. So now I'm collaborating with something that's already here. And if you want to invite friends over or do this with yourself, you can make up a lot of these pieces of paper that already have something on it, let them dry, and then your friends can pick different ones to work with, and you can pick your friends' pieces that maybe they did, or in a classroom you could have these nice, this is Bristol paper, by the way. It's a little curvy and curly right now because of the water that went on it, but I didn't use watercolor paper because I wanted to have a surface that was really good for the oil pastels. Not saying watercolor paper isn't, it's just so textured that I wanted it to also be good for the graphite and also for the charcoal that I'm going to bring in a second. So I can play all I want with my graphite, and on the other pieces that we did that capitalize on these mixed media of graphite, vine charcoal, oil pastels, and colored pencils, and now along with a base of watercolor, I suggested that you for sure connect with your pencil by staying connected to the paper, and then by doing straight and curved lines. But I have done much more repetitive and less contrasting lines here on the surface that was already prepared by the color and the water and the movement of the watercolor with the large brush that I did on this ahead of time. So I'm going to stop here now with the graphite. Thank the graphite for its appearance. I can always come back with more if I want. And then I'm going to see about collecting some kind of a, how do I want to do this and still maximize my watercolor? I want to collect some big form in the middle, because this will really show that the bigger forms come forward and smaller forms go back. So this is going to be kind of like a blobby thing. It's not lost on me that these lines ended up being somewhat finger-esque. The whole thing could turn into something that would be more like an underwater scene. But I'm not looking for a scene. I'm looking to stay abstract, looking to work in the kind of a way that is non-objective. There's no object that we are particularly supporting here. And so we are working with all of the components of observational drawing without having anything to necessarily observe or make happen. As I'm in here in the white, I'm realizing this is a nice place for me maybe to pause on my whites here and go in with the charcoal into them, sort of giving some support to the color, like leaving the color. I'll do it over here. Just kind of got that idea, and that's what you're going to do here, is just see, where do I get an idea to do this, and where do I get an idea to do that? And of course you don't have to think about it because you're in the process of doing it and watching it. And so this is so much about doing and watching and getting all of us ready to do a very low stakes activity that is just amazing at firing up our creative brain, both with what we're watching, all this movement that we're watching, and all this movement that we're making. So we're staying connected, we're creating, and we're collaborating with what we see here on the paper. So it's a delightful thing to do. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to work out. But here's a little secret, and that is when you stay connected to what you're doing, you don't stop, and in this case, you work kind of fast, then it's going to have a wholeness to it. It's going to have a unity and a consistency. And here I am now finger painting. One of the things I like about the vine charcoal comes like this, and ends up being these little sticks that kind of break up if you want them to, and sometimes if you don't want them to. It ends up being like finger painting. I can just come in here and use my hands, and this is non-toxic. This is just charcoal. It doesn't have any pigment in it. All of its pigment is made from the burning process. So it's just here for you, and it's not even very flyaway. You don't probably have to concern yourself too much unless you're prone to being real sensitive to stuff that's in the air, but it's not even, to me, it's not even as chalky as dry pastels are. So here we are with all of that, and now this is a darker value right now than this. So this is acting as the light value, and this is acting as the dark value. So this is light as light, and this is dark as dark. And as soon as this starts to contain more vibrant colors and also more black and white, and I can play with it right now again if I want to, play with maybe having something like this. We're working with bigger shapes and bigger lines now on anything that is, this is something I just love to do. You know, sometimes you do things that you love to do and you think, am I doing that again? But it's such a preference. I just sometimes love to kind of, I don't know, make something that does this like this. Now again, it doesn't have to stay like that. Look what happens if I just go ahead and smear the whole thing. So there's many times that you're making patinas, you're making something a little bit desaturated, a little bit smushy, a little bit backgroundy, and then you can pull this back forward on top of it. Oh my goodness, look at this. All right, not to worry. It's not, I'm not even going to take a little break here. I'm just going to go ahead with it, and I'm going to come back in here now. I've done the charcoal and the graphite underneath that, and I'm going to start to play a little bit. I think I first want to play in what I'm calling the background, all this back behind this big giant hand glove form and so forth. And this, I'm looking at, you know, this is what's fun about this color that already pre-exists in the watercolor. This is a fun way to say, hey, maybe I'll pick up this because it's a lot like these guys. So this green I can do this with. And again, just scribbling quickly, more in some places. If there's places that I want to exaggerate, accentuate with it, green on top of green. If I want to desaturate over here and I want that to be out of it, I can bring what would be the split complement of the orange. Blue, and I'll grab a blue. Blue would be the complement of the orange. See how quickly that just dulls it out when I get right on top of it there? And it just kind of makes it more of a brown very, very quickly. Blue on top of blue is going to accentuate the blue, bring out more kind of pure color with the blue, and still give a texture, a patina. This isn't exactly metal, so patina is probably the wrong word, but I like the idea of the more complex surface that you often get on metal when it's been exposed to elements or to acids and things like that. So that's my background in jewelry and metal coming out. I like the word patina. I also like an Italian word. There's an Italian word for ghosts, like the ghost of what got made. You have bits and pieces of something that went before that's not a major player right now. Now I'm going to purposely leave this white. Sometimes when you get a chance to have something like white, and again you're just watching, I'm going to pull this and then pull, look at that, ooh, I'm going to pull out the charcoal with my kneaded eraser. And so it's still going to have the little bit of color, little bit of charcoal, little bit of the marks that were made by the graphite in there. And I may put a little bit more in there just to kind of showcase those now. All right, there we go with all of the underlayment here, and this could be gone over a lot. This is a fun thing to do. When I get here in the green, oh, it's awesome. And I could start to let some of this pour out if I wanted to, pour out of here. I'm not that impressed with it. I like the charcoal edge, I think, more than I like and that's just, this is not a preference I knew about before I started doing this one, and it's not a preference that's necessarily going to last with me and be a governing thing on all of these abstract creations that I may keep doing for the fun of it, and also for the image of it, and also for the practice of it. I'm kind of looking around right now for something a little blacker, and I'll go with this. Here's a black, I think it's a black. Don't know if a couple of blacks came in this set or not. Doesn't seem to have has more of a number on it than a black on it. So now I'm going to go into, and I can always come back to my colored pencils if there's areas that I want to exaggerate their own color. I like that a lot. I'm putting this pink in on top of it, and I'm being guided by where the pink was, where the pink is, and I'm working, of course, to make it more, you know, I don't like that word interesting, because we want to change it up so we're not saying, well, that's really interesting. You know, what do you think about this? I mean, in any conversation, not just an art conversation. What do you think about that? Oh, well, I think it's really interesting. Really? Then, okay, what do you feel about that? I guess you wouldn't say, well, I feel it's really interesting. So maybe we should ask, how do you feel about that? And so then people would say, well, you know, it seems to be worthwhile, or it seems to really come out there, or it really gives me the creeps, or it's kind of chilling, or it's just so fun and playful that it, you know, holds my interesting, holds my interest, holds my attention. It's very attention getting. It's very perplexing. It's I wonder why an artist would do that. I wonder how an artist would do that. Let's hopefully keep pushing ourselves to our feelings, our senses. And so here, one of the overriding things here is that we're working for the background, especially in these upper parts of the background, to be more background, to be farther back. So I want to show you just with this how I could really spend days on this. And this is what's fun about this. You could have something like this going, and then you are going to take breaks from it, but because it's so well organized, because it was so well connected to from the very beginning with your continuous lines, and with the flow of the watercolor not trying to be anything besides itself underneath it, and then coming in on top of that gives you sometimes possibly the confidence to really shine with your very saturated colors once you've built less saturation underneath them. And this, by the way, is very much how painting is done, is that you're going to build it from behind. You're going to do underpainting. And in this case, we also have underdrawing. So that's it's a fun thing that I had not really thought about. I've always thought about underpainting and painting in layers, but not really thinking about underdrawing, even though I've been doing it for quite some time. I love to scribble. Actually, I love to let light be blocked, in other words, known as making shadows on a canvas, and then scribble on top of the canvas, going with what basically the flow of the shadows, the patterns of the shadows. And here we started with the patterns the patterns that were set by the watercolor. And of course, when we did that, when I did it, or if you guys are changing, exchanging underpaintings of this type, of a brief painting of watercolor onto the paper, let dry, and come back. If you're exchanging that, then you're in collaboration with the person who did it before. If you are not exchanging it, you're in collaboration with you, the person who did it before. So again, you can just see here without doing much with the oil pastels. Let's turn it around so you can see it the way I'm seeing it, and so I can see it upside down. I think, oh gosh, I'm loving this outer area. And you know, one of the things that people are afraid of doing, what do you think people are afraid of doing? Just really afraid, because it's something that kids and babies have to learn how not to do, or where to do it purposely. And people are afraid of making a mess, and they're afraid of not necessarily being able to clean it up. Grabbed the wrong one there. Did not want brown, very desaturated. That's not what I wanted there. I wanted to desaturate this area, not with brown. I tend to not use brown. I love to use colors, even if the colors like this olive that's kind of gray is desaturated, it's still a color. So if I make a brown, I like to make a brown. I like to change the colors of things so they're not just the colors that are out of the tube or that are out of the tray of watercolor straight. I like my colors to belong to my paintings more so than to belong to the set that they came from. So here we are, just kind of smushing this and giving it a feeling of being more integrated. Now this is a huge thing to start thinking about how something stands out in a drawing or stands out in a painting, but then also sinks into it, feels like it's all one surface, like it's not popping. Popping, yes, everybody loves that word popping, that really popped. And in some ways what we are learning to do here is to make things pop, but one of the ways you make things pop is you have to make things go back. You know, things can't pop out without coming out of something that stays back behind what's popping out. This is ending up being much more of a, I want to make these lines kind of big because they live inside of all of this that is big. Inside all of this that is big. And so now I have big lines, but I want to change the color quality of these big lines so that they're even more exciting. Maybe we can exchange the word interesting for exciting. I want it to excite, and one of the things that excites is when things change. They don't have to always change in a big way. Oil pastels kind of gives us a chance for things to transition in big ways from one color to another. Okay, so I'm working this. This is kind of nice. This color picks up that color quite a bit right here. Maybe I want this edge to even be more substantial. One of the ways to make it more substantial would be to bring black on top of it, but another way might be to use the split complement of this purple on top of this green. The complement of green would be red, but then purple's out to the side of red, so it's out to the one side of red. The other side of red is orange. So it will, I love how it goes around. It becomes different colors because it's next to different colors. Sometimes you can use the same stick of whatever or the same color of paint, and as long as the background or what it's next to changes, I'm going to give a skip here because I want to leave this. I want to leave some white. I'm sticking to my watercolor. The watercolor always lives very well with some white, and even though we have so much going on here in addition to the watercolor still wants to breathe the way watercolor wants to breathe, where it shows that I don't go everywhere, I only go some places. I go where there's water, I don't go where there's no water. And so I want to leave some of the signature of the watercolor in here as well. And so our last thing I'm starting to contemplate, like, is it time? is it time now to go to a color that I haven't used maybe, but not to stand out all by itself, but is it time maybe to go to the gamsol, to go to the the odorless turpentine-like substance that would pair well with the oil pastel in terms of making yet another element here. And somewhat, it'll be interesting. This is actually, believe it or not, going to be the first time that I've done oil pastels on top of watercolor. That this would be a wonderful way to get away from that blank piece of paper, add yet another element to work with, and a layer of permission, a layer of excitement. Let's see about, speaking of excitement, let's hit this with some pink. Let's make it occur another place besides just down there and in here. Now again, sometimes you get a great idea, but the minute the great idea goes everywhere, it's no longer kind of having its own special voice. So don't want to just always do the same thing everywhere. Now I might even put some of this, which is desaturated. See this nice kind of ochre color. I might put some of this in here just next to these lines to support them in being brilliant, just to support them. So the idea of mud is a good idea. Just be sure about your mud. Make sure that you put your mud next to something so that you'll have a saturation contrast. You'll have a saturation between mud or faded out color and highly saturated color. So I'm playing that a little bit in here. Again, I don't want to play it too much, although right down here it told me I could just kind of come down in there and that would be good. And now this is kind of fun because I've got this blue here and then I'm bringing this blue into here, which tells me it might be just awesome to bring some blue in here. Now I've got to be careful not to cut out too much of my watercolor. There's something that I think is very interesting, and that is, not that you can figure this out 100%, but what percentage of this color do you have in, or what percentage of saturated of your piece is highly saturated, and what percentage is highly unsaturated. Okay, but also what percentage is this color and what percentage is that color, because every time we make a mark, we're changing the percentages on those. Now, we don't have a Scantron or something like that to throw all this into. Okay, let me grab the substance that is the correct substance here. So this is a gamsol, and I'm going to go in here and start to play with it. And, this is another thing that this teaches you. The oil is already on the paper, so we're not loading the brush, but we are loading the gamsol. We are loading how much mushy, smushy, blendy stuff we're going to have in here. And again, this is a place that you just want to watch what's happening. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be apprehensive, but you might want to watch what's happening. Now, always, it's a good idea, if you are concerned about it, to make another piece of paper that you can experiment on while you're working on this. For me, and really for you too, as long as you watch what's happening and do many of these where you start to learn the properties of each of the mediums, like what they'll do together, what they can do by themselves. Here's a little bit of this. This gamsol does give us a chance to go, watch this, just a little bit shadowy, kind of a little bit watercolory right next to it. Now, going in every time and doing the same thing again every single time, not a good idea. You always have that option, but don't take it right away. Push yourself to move around and try different things. And one of the ways that can happen is that you work really quickly. Another way it can happen is that you slow down occasionally and get back from this. Put it up on a wall if it's not going to run, and nothing on here really runs. The This gamsol really evaporates almost as quickly as it goes on the paper. It soaks into the paper, it soaks into the oil pastel, and it also evaporates. So this is where we're just playing this. Every time I'm in here with the gamsol, I'm cutting down on that heavy texture that the oil pastel tends to put down when it's used in a line way. And that was one of the reasons I went to using the gamsol, or baby oil is possible too. Although the baby oil gets it pretty oily. The baby oil would not be good in here where I just have the paper, because where it would flow out, it would make like an oil slick. Whereas with the gamsol, the turpentine-esque, less toxic substance, we don't get oil slicks. It doesn't really go any further than where you put it, and if it does, it evaporates and you don't have to wait for oil to dry. So I like this. But I also, one of the reasons I like the gamsol and I like the brush is you can see how I'm learning to use my brush in so many different ways. And you'll also see that I hold the brush back, and I find that people really do hold brushes back, but these days a lot of times there isn't so much cursive taught in school for writing, handwriting that is flowy and connected. And so people are holding their pencils a lot and doing this, which you'll see is impossible because you can't see what you're doing. But the painting tends to get everybody back off the end of their pencil, and in this case off the end of the brush. It's much more natural to hold in this position with a brush, and that can be transferred then to a pencil, and that's a better way of holding a pencil, because you have a lot more movement and you can see what's going on and so forth, and you have changes in pressure that are available to you, all sorts of things. Isn't it fun to just work? You could have music on. You could be working with other people. You can be having this be something that you do to relax in the evening, and that you work on maybe many of these. You have a lot of these going, and whichever one suits your fancy on any given evening, you just go ahead and do it.
It was whispering, telling me I ain't never been no better.